Welcome, and thank you for joining me for this presentation about vBooks. My name is Mike Harris. Today I'm going to show you a really great technology that can be used to distribute information, knowledge, and even live training to anybody, anywhere around the country or even around the world. Before we get into what a vBook is, which it's a virtual book, most people maybe mistake it for video because it can deliver video, but it's really a virtual book. So the concept here is a virtual book or a virtual office. But let's talk a little bit about the history of why we developed this virtual book. The underlying technology really comes from a knowledge management system. When you ask people what is a knowledge management system, they probably give you this blank stare and aren't sure what it is. Well, knowledge management system basically is this knowledge. I have knowledge, I'm giving you knowledge. We put knowledge into training manuals and books and DVDs and videos, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But it's knowledge, and in distributing that knowledge, teachers, they provide knowledge to students and kids. So, the knowledge management system is a system that's been developed to take that knowledge and distribute it. Traditional knowledge management systems, though, have certain flaws and certain characteristics that make it challenging to distribute it just to anybody. Most people, when they have a knowledge management system, take all that knowledge, put it into one environment, one container, and maybe only 10% of that applies to each one of you. Well, you have to get through the other 90% to get just the information that you're looking for. So we try to come up with an easier to use system, an easy to access system. We still need a central location to kind of get to this data. Right? We go to a library because a library has all that information that we may need for research. And also we got to have it flexible to make it unique to each individual facility. We also took a look at, more importantly, I think, the methods of training out there today and what their inefficiencies are, and try to come up with a better way to deliver that knowledge out to the masses. Recording information is nothing new. My classes have always been recorded. The problem was, how do you distribute them? So we looked at, first of all, traditional training. What are the limitations of traditional training? The biggest thing is probably cost. Right? You have to hire somebody like myself to come out on site, do the training, deliver the knowledge, and then I'm going to leave. So you have to pay for my expenses and my time, obviously, on site. The other part of that is limited class sizes. Most classrooms, if you're doing a computer-type class, it's 10 users to the class. You could do a lecture style where you're doing 30, 40, or even more users. The problem with that is the other problem then is the retention. How do you gauge the retention of what you're learning? If you've ever been to a 3-day class, I'm sure most of you have. After you leave in 3 days, you're so filled with information that you probably remember 30% of what you were taught. Luckily, you remember what maybe the instructor's name on day one, but the rest of the information is kind of hard to get. How do you go back and get that information without sitting through the class again? So that's one aspect of it. We're not saying traditional training, this will replace traditional training, but if you look at what we're producing something that's 1/10 of the cost of traditional training, but still very effective. And you'll see that in our mechanisms, or our methods for capturing knowledge and information and then redistributing it out to the users. Webinars. Webinars have kind of replaced some traditional on-site training, but what do you get with a webinar? Well, what you get with a webinar is just this right here. You don't see the instructor. You just hear me talking, you hear the PowerPoint, see the PowerPoint presentation, but you don't get to see the instructor. So one of the things that we've done is put the instructor in the video. So here you can see I'm in the video. It still gives you that webinar type feel, can be distributed, but it's still traditional training. What are the other problems with webinars? Is that they're distributed through the web, which really isn't a problem, but it's not searchable. And then how do you actually control who gets it and who accesses it? And which brings us to our next section, which is websites. Websites, internet, they're great for distributing information, and most people, some websites are more cluttered with information, very difficult to find the information you want. You have to kind of search and look for it. Again, is that 10% or is that 90% that pertains to everybody? You got to get through. Plus, you've got a webmaster bottleneck. If you want to change information on that website, you have to go through the webmaster. Has to be approved. So there's time involved, cost involved with that. Most people say, well, I can just take a PDF and post it on our internet. Well, yeah, it's free. Not really. There's a cost involved with doing that. There's a cost involved with hosting the website. All that information has to be factored in when you look at the total system that we've developed here. The other method is e-learning. E-learning is been around for a while. Most people have e-learning sites and information, and they're great, but again, you get that this is e-learning. You don't get the instructor in the video. So is it really e-learning? It's and a lot of times people get through it. It's the videos aren't searchable if there are videos. Most of it is text. Again, it goes back to the distribution through the website. The cost involved with creating, the setup, the maintaining, and the hosting is all a factor of what you're going to see here today of what we feel that we've improved upon. CDs and DVDs. Make a class, record it to a DVD, that's great, distribute it out. There's your first problem. How do you distribute it? What's the cost of producing DVDs? The actual DVD is cheap, but the production time, the recording time, what happens if something changes? Well, you have to reproduce those DVDs and redistribute them out to everybody who has one. The last one I'll talk about is blogs and discussion groups. Blogs have kind of come on the scene in the last few years. A lot of people have blogs. Question, if you do have a blog, that's great. You're distributing knowledge and information. You know, that's intellectual knowledge that you could probably capture, put into a vBook, and distribute out to more people in an easier to use format. And you'll see that it's a little bit easier to create a vBook than it is to set up and maintain a blog. The other part of that is that you go back to websites, you go back to blogs, DVD, e-learning you can download and purchase. You want to look at the business model or the sales distribution of blogs and websites, compared to the vBooks, which we'll talk about here a little bit later today. So we took the knowledge management system and we said, how can we make it better? How can we make it easier? Well, where was knowledge stored before there were computers? It was stored in a book, right? So if I had knowledge, I would put it in a book, I would write a book, I would sell that book, make copies of the book, give it out, hand it out. And then as I collected more books, what would we do with those books? We'd put them on a bookshelf. So we all grow up from a very young age learning how to use a book. There's our concept for vBooks. So here you can see, this is a screenshot example of what a virtual office is. Looks like a bookshelf. I got books. I can move books from shelf to shelf. But the neat thing about this is that we have a search bar. So the search bar lets us ask the system a question. It searches the books in our office and then comes back and gives us an answer. So instead of showing you the PowerPoints, let's go ahead and give a quick demonstration of this. So I'm just going to go right to an internet browser.